Ravik adjusted his molecular camouflage as he perched on the ledge of the research facility, his crystalline eyes scanning the interior through layers of concrete and steel. The human structure was primitive compared to the soaring spires of his homeworld, but it served its purpose. Inside, his target moved about her laboratory, unaware of the death that watched from above. Dr. Samantha Wells. The name meant nothing to him, she was simply another contract, another threat to be eliminated. The briefing had been clear, she had discovered a way to neutralize the HFY biological weapons, the cornerstone of his species' military superiority. Such knowledge made her existence untenable. Ravik had killed 42 sentient beings in his career. Each death had served the greater good, protecting his people's interests across the galaxy. This should have been no different. Yet as he watched Dr. Wells work, something felt wrong. Her movements were careful, deliberate, protecting not just herself, but the life growing within her. She was pregnant. The realization hit him like a plasma burst to the chest. Among his people, the HFY, pregnancy was sacred. Their low birth rate made every new life precious, every child a gift to be protected by the entire community. It was why he had chosen to become a sanctioned assassin, to eliminate threats to his people's children, to preserve their future. Target located, he subvocalized into his neural comm, requesting mission parameters. Proceed with elimination, came the immediate response. Pregnancy status irrelevant to mission objectives. Ravik's inner eyelids flickered in surprise. No HFY would ever consider pregnancy irrelevant. It went against everything their society stood for. He watched as Dr. Wells paused her work to rest a hand on her swollen belly, a small smile crossing her face. Confirm order, he transmitted. The target is with child. Order confirmed. Eliminate target immediately. Something was very wrong. He had never received such an order in his 15 years of service. The HFY had strict protocols about pregnant targets, they were to be monitored until after birth, then evaluated for threat level. A quick check of his neural interface showed the order came through proper channels, but its content violated core HFY principles. Dr. Wells moved to her computer, typing rapidly. From his vantage point, Ravik could see complex molecular structures rotating on her screen. Her research was indeed related to their biological weapons, but something about the data pattern seemed off. Why would a pregnant human scientist be working on counteragents to weapons she shouldn't even know existed? His training urged him to complete the mission. His instincts screamed that he was missing crucial information. Among his people, pregnancy granted universal protection. It was one of the few laws that transcended planetary boundaries and political divisions. Even their most hardened criminals wouldn't harm a pregnant female of any species. Request clarification on pregnancy protocols, he transmitted. Protocols suspended for this target. Proceed immediately. Ravik's hand tightened on his phase pistol. In 15 years, he had never questioned an order. But he had also never been ordered to violate the most sacred law of his people. He watched as Dr. Wells gathered her research materials, preparing to leave for the day. She moved with the careful grace of a female in her second trimester, one hand occasionally steadying herself on nearby surfaces. He could take the shot now. Clean, quick, painless. She would never know what hit her. The child would die instantly, spared any suffering. He raised his weapon, aligning it with her center mass. Dr. Wells stopped at her desk, picking up a small holographic image. Even from his position, Ravik could see it was an ultrasound. She smiled at it, touching it gently before placing it in her bag. The simple gesture carried such weight of emotion that Ravik felt it even through the distance between them. His weapon lowered. Something was very wrong with this mission, and he intended to find out what. But first, he needed to ensure both Dr. Wells and her child survived the night. Because if he had been sent to kill her, others would follow. Target lost, he transmitted. switching to surveillance mode. He would face consequences for this decision. But as he watched Dr. Wells leave the laboratory, her hand protectively cradling her belly, he knew he could face anything except violating the most sacred law of his people. Whatever she had discovered, whatever threat she posed, there had to be another solution. Ravik melted into the shadows, following her at a discreet distance. He was no longer her executioner, he had appointed himself her guardian. At least until he discovered the truth behind this troubling mission. The sun set over the research facility as two figures departed, a pregnant scientist heading home, and a troubled assassin who had chosen conscience over duty. Neither knew that this night would change not just their lives, but the relationship between their species forever. 3 days of surveillance had taught Ravik more about human behavior than his entire military training. Dr. Wells kept a precise schedule, arriving at the laboratory each morning at 0700 hours, breaking for nutrition at midday, and departing at 1800 hours. She lived alone in a modest dwelling 15 minutes from the facility, ordered food delivery rather than cooking, and spoke to her unborn child when she thought no one was listening. But it was her research that truly fascinated him. Through the facility's primitive security systems, which might as well have been transparent to his advanced tech, Ravik watched her work. She wasn't developing a weapon against his people. She was trying to save them. The degradation rate is increasing, she muttered to herself, studying complex molecular models. If they keep using these weapons, the genetic damage will become irreversible within 3 generations. Ravik's inner eyelids flickered rapidly as he processed this information. The HFY birth rate had been declining for decades, but the military insisted it was due to natural evolutionary changes. Could their own biological weapons be the true cause? His neural comm crackled. Status report, Operative Ravik. Target under surveillance, he responded automatically. Seeking optimal elimination scenario. The lies came easier now, each one justified by the growing certainty that something was deeply wrong within his own government. Accelerate timeline, the voice ordered. Secondary team being dispatched. Ravik's crystalline eyes narrowed. Secondary team meant they suspected his hesitation. He had perhaps 48 hours before more assassins arrived, ones who wouldn't share his moral qualms. That night, he made a decision that would either damn or redeem him. He waited until Dr. Wells prepared for sleep, then deliberately triggered her home security system. As alarms blared, he stepped out of the shadows into her bedroom. Dr. Samantha Wells, he said, keeping his hands visible and his weapon holstered. I am not here to harm you. She spun around, eyes wide, one hand protectively covering her pregnant belly. To her credit, she didn't scream. Your HFY, she said, voice steady despite her obvious fear. I wondered when they'd send someone. You knew you were being watched? I knew they'd try to silence me once I discovered the truth. She straightened her spine, meeting his alien gaze. Are you here to kill me? That was my mission, Ravik admitted. But I've spent 3 days watching you work. You're not trying to destroy our weapons. You're trying to prevent them from destroying us. The genetic degradation is accelerating faster than I anticipated, she said, her scientific curiosity seemingly overriding her fear. Within 3 generations, the damage to HFY DNA will be irreversible. The weapons need to be decommissioned and the affected populations treated, or your species faces extinction. Ravik's training screamed that this was forbidden knowledge, that she needed to be silenced. But his conscience, the part of him that had balked at killing a pregnant female, knew she spoke the truth. More assassins are coming, he said. Ones who won't hesitate to kill you, pregnancy notwithstanding. You need to disappear. I can't, she replied, gesturing to her computer. My research isn't finished. Without the complete treatment protocol, the genetic damage can't be reversed. I need at least 2 more weeks. Ravik considered their options. His own life was already forfeit, the moment he'd chosen not to kill her, he'd become a traitor. But perhaps he could still serve his people by protecting her. Then we have 2 weeks to complete your research and find proof of who ordered your assassination, he said. Because someone high in my government knows about the genetic damage and is trying to hide it. Why are you helping me? She asked, still wary but with growing hope in her eyes. Ravik touched the ceremonial marks on his face, symbols of his oath as a sanctioned assassin. I kill to protect my people's future. Right now, you and your child represent that future more than those who gave me my orders. He moved to the window, checking the perimeter. Pack what you need. We'll relocate to a secure location I've prepared. You'll continue your research there while I investigate who wants you silenced. As Dr. Wells quickly gathered her essential materials, Ravik sent a false report through his neural comm, target scheduled for midnight shift. Will execute during optimal window. The response was immediate, confirmed. Secondary team will stand by. He had bought them some time, but not much. As he helped Dr. Wells into his stealth transport, he realized how completely his life had changed in just 3 days. He had gone from being her executioner to her protector, from a loyal soldier to a rebel. But watching her settle into the transport, one hand absently rubbing her pregnant belly as she reviewed research data on her tablet, he knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes protecting your people meant standing against those who claimed to lead them. They'll brand me a traitor for this, he said quietly. Dr. Wells looked up from her tablet. History will know you as a savior, she replied. Assuming we survive the next 2 weeks. As they disappeared into the night, Ravik hoped she was right. Because the alternative meant the end of everything, his career, her life, and quite possibly the future of his entire species. The abandoned research outpost had been Ravik's emergency fallback location for years. Hidden within a mountain range and shielded from standard scanners, it offered them the perfect combination of security and scientific equipment. As Dr. Wells worked, Ravik divided his time between securing the perimeter and diving deep into classified KHREF databases through his neural interface. They're going to notice you accessing these files, Dr. Wells said on their 5th day of hiding, not looking up from her microscope. The dark circles under her eyes testified to her exhaustion, but she refused to rest more than absolutely necessary. They already have, Ravik replied, his crystalline eyes flickering as he processed streams of encrypted data. But they can't block my access without revealing their own illegal activities. Being a sanctioned assassin has its advantages. The evidence he'd uncovered was damning. 20 years ago, a secret military faction called the Eternal Dominion had developed the biological weapons program without the knowledge of the KHREF High Council. When scientists discovered the weapons were causing genetic damage to their own people, the faction leaders didn't shut it down, they simply buried the research and eliminated anyone who discovered the truth. Director Venn, Ravik muttered, finally putting a name to their enemy. He's been running the program from the shadows, using his position on the Military Science Council to cover his tracks. The same Venn who recently published research claiming the declining birth rate was natural? Dr. Wells asked, finally looking up from her work. The very same. He's been systematically eliminating evidence of the weapon's effects while expanding their use. The genetic damage isn't just affecting military personnel anymore, it's spreading through the civilian population. A warning flashed through Ravik's neural interface. Someone was probing their location's defensive systems. We have company, he announced, activating additional security measures. Multiple signatures, highly trained. The secondary team has found us. Dr. Wells straightened, one hand protectively covering her belly. I need more time. The treatment protocol is almost complete, but without proof of where the damage originated. How much longer? Ravik checked his weapons while monitoring the approaching threats. 12 hours minimum. But we also need a way to distribute the evidence to people who can actually use it. Ravik's inner eyelids flickered in what Dr. Wells had learned was his equivalent of a smile. That part I've handled. Remember how I said they can't block my access? Every time they've detected me in their systems, I've been planting encrypted data packets. One command from me, and every member of the High Council receives proof of the Eternal Dominion's activities. A blast rocked the outpost's outer defenses. Dr. Wells stumbled, but Ravik caught her arm, steadying her. Your safety protocols are impressive, she noted, trying to hide her fear behind scientific interest. They'll hold for about 3 hours, he replied. How are you with weapons? I'm a scientist, not a soldier. Then you focus on completing that treatment protocol. I'll handle our visitors. He moved to the security station, activating additional defensive measures. By the way, have you thought of a name? What? The non sequitur caught her off guard. For the child, he gestured to her pregnant belly. Among my people, names are chosen based on the circumstances of conception or gestation. This little one has certainly had an interesting journey. Dr. Wells laughed despite their dire situation. I was thinking of Thea. It means divine gift in Greek. Seems appropriate, considering she's the reason you chose not to kill me. Another blast shook the outpost. Ravik checked the sensors. The attackers were making progress faster than he'd expected. They'd brought heavy weapons, which meant they didn't care about subtlety anymore. Director Venn must be getting desperate. Thea, he repeated, testing the name. A good choice. Now, let's make sure she gets a chance to use it. He began typing rapidly into the security console. I'm going to trigger a cascading series of explosions in the outer sectors. It will look like we're trying to escape through the north tunnel. That should buy us some time. And where will we actually be going? South, through a maintenance shaft they won't know about. There's a small settlement 3 kilometers away. The locals owe me a favor, they'll hide us long enough for you to complete your work. Dr. Wells gathered her research materials with practiced efficiency. And then? Then we broadcast everything, your treatment protocol and my evidence. Let the High Council and the public see exactly what the Eternal Dominion has been doing to our people. He paused, considering. Assuming we survive, would you consider continuing your research? Our medical community will need help implementing the treatment on a large scale. Are you offering me a job? She managed a tired smile. I thought you were supposed to kill me, not recruit me. Plans change. Ravik activated the explosive sequence, then moved to help her pack. Sometimes for the better. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of battle growing closer. Finally, Dr. Wells spoke again. Thank you, Ravik. Not just for sparing us, but for helping expose the truth. Your people deserve to know what's happening to them. Save your thanks until we've survived the next 12 hours, he replied, but his tone was warm. Besides, I should be thanking you and Thea. You reminded me that being loyal to one's people sometimes means standing against their leaders. The outpost shook with another blast, closer this time. Ravik checked his weapons one final time, then helped Dr. Wells shoulder her pack of equipment. Ready? She nodded, determination replacing fear in her eyes. Ready. Let's go save your species. As they slipped into the maintenance shaft, Ravik reflected that his life had become considerably more complicated since choosing not to pull that trigger 10 days ago. But watching Dr. Wells navigate the tunnel ahead of him, carrying both her unborn child and the research that could save his people, he knew he wouldn't have it any other way. The truth was finally emerging. Now they just had to live long enough to share it. The settlement of Nyxhaven existed in a legal gray area, technically under KHRETH jurisdiction but far enough from major cities to maintain its independence. Its inhabitants were a mix of species who preferred to avoid official attention, which made it perfect for hiding fugitives. Less perfect for performing delicate genetic research. Hold it steadier, Dr. Wells instructed as Ravik helped calibrate a makeshift molecular scanner. They had set up in the back room of a medical clinic run by Dr. Thiele, a KHREF physician who had once treated Ravik after a mission gone wrong. The elderly doctor had taken one look at Dr. Wells's pregnant belly and offered them sanctuary without questions. These tools are ancient, Ravik observed, making minute adjustments to the scanner. They'll have to do. Dr. Wells checked the readings. The genetic repair sequence is almost complete. Once I prove it can reverse the damage. A quiet chime from Ravik's neural interface interrupted her. We have a problem, he said, straightening. Someone just accessed my emergency protocols using an old authentication code. Someone who should be dead. Hostile? If it were, we'd already be under attack. He moved to the door, weapon ready. Stay here. In the clinic's front room, he found Dr. Thiele speaking with a hooded figure. The stranger turned, lowering their hood to reveal familiar crystalline eyes and ceremonial assassin's marks. Hello, old friend, said Mentor Kavaris, Ravik's former training master. You've caused quite a stir. Ravik kept his weapon raised. You died 2 years ago. I attended your memorial. A necessary deception. Kavaris's inner eyelids flickered with amusement. After I discovered what the Eternal Dominion was doing, I realized I could do more good underground than dead. Prove it's you. On your final training mission, you spared a target because their death would have orphaned 3 children. I endorsed your decision against protocol because compassion makes us better killers, not worse ones. The older assassin spread his hands. The same compassion that led you to spare Dr. Wells and her child. Ravik lowered his weapon slowly. How did you find us? I've been watching Director Venn for years, gathering evidence. When I learned he'd dispatched you to eliminate a pregnant human scientist, I knew he must be getting desperate. I've been tracking you ever since. Then you know what we've discovered? About the weapon's genetic damage? Yes. But my evidence alone wasn't enough. We needed proof that the damage could be reversed, or the High Council would never act against the Eternal Dominion. They'd fear the panic it would cause. Kavaris gestured to the back room. Which is why Dr. Wells's research is so crucial. Dr. Wells emerged from the back room, having obviously heard everything. You've been building a case against them? For 3 years. Kavaris regarded her with respect. Many good people died trying to expose the truth. But Venn's influence runs deep. We needed irrefutable evidence and a viable solution before we could move against him. The treatment protocol is almost ready, she said. But Venn's assassins are closing in. We need more time. Time you now have. Kavaris activated a holographic display showing tactical data. I didn't come alone. Loyal members of the Assassins Guild are creating a diversion that will keep Venn's forces occupied. And more importantly, I've made contact with Counselor Naira of the High Council. She's willing to help, but will need to move fast. Ravik studied the tactical display. Naira controls the Public Health Committee. If we can get her the evidence, she can order an immediate investigation into the weapons program, Kavaris confirmed. But it has to be done through official channels, with full documentation. Otherwise, Venn will claim it's a political attack. How long? Dr. Wells asked, one hand absently rubbing her belly. The diversion will buy us 8 hours at most. After that, Venn will realize he's being played and pull his forces back. Dr. Wells squared her shoulders. I can finish the protocol in 6. But I'll need better equipment than what we have here. Already arranged. Kavaris produced a small device. This will connect you to a secure terminal in Counselor Naira's private laboratory. State-of-the-art equipment, completely off the official networks. It's still risky, Ravik pointed out. If Venn realizes what we're doing. Everything worth doing involves risk, my former student. Kavaris's expression grew serious. But there's something else you should know. The genetic damage isn't just affecting adults anymore. We're seeing birth defects in new pregnancies. If we don't act now, the next generation of KHREF will bear the full brunt of what the Eternal Dominion has done. Dr. Wells's hand tightened protectively over her belly. Then we have no choice. We have to succeed. I'll help you set up the connection to Naira's lab, Kivari said. Ravik, we'll need you to monitor security. If Ven's forces discover this location. They won't. Ravik checked his weapons. No one reaches her until the work is done. As they prepared for what would hopefully be their final push, Ravik reflected on how much had changed. 2 weeks ago, he had been a loyal assassin preparing to eliminate a threat. Now he was part of a conspiracy to expose the very leaders he had once served, working alongside his supposedly dead mentor to protect the woman he had been sent to kill. But watching Dr. Wells prepare her equipment, her determination unwavering despite her exhaustion, he knew they were on the right side of history. Sometimes the greatest act of loyalty was standing against those who had betrayed their own people's trust. 6 hours, he said softly. Let's make them count. The next 6 hours were a blur of intense activity. Dr. Wells worked tirelessly at the secure terminal, her fingers flying over the holographic interface as she completed the treatment protocol. Ravik and Kivaris maintained a vigilant guard, monitoring both physical and digital security as reports came in from their allies across the city. Treatment sequence complete, Dr. Wells announced, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. Running final validation tests now. Ravik checked the time. 7 minutes ahead of schedule. Kivaris? The older assassin was focused on his neural interface. Counselor Naira is standing by. But we have another problem. Ven's forces are pulling back sooner than expected. He must suspect something. How long? 20 minutes, maybe less. Dr. Wells didn't look up from her work. Validation at 90%. I won't transmit until it's complete. We can't risk any errors in the treatment protocol. The building security system pinged a warning. Ravik checked the sensors and felt his blood run cold. Multiple aircraft approaching. Military-grade stealth systems. 10 more minutes, Dr. Wells insisted, her hands steadied despite the tension. The validation has to finish. Kivaris moved to the window, his experienced eyes scanning the darkened sky. Ravik, get the data to Naira. I'll hold them here. That's suicide. I've been dead for 2 years already. Kivaris smiled grimly. Besides, I'm not planning to die today. I just need to slow them down. The building shook with the first impact. They were being smart this time, no warnings, no demands, just immediate overwhelming force. Ravik helped Dr. Wells stay steady as she worked. Validation at 95%, she reported. Beginning final compilation. Kivaris was already moving, activating devices that would scramble sensors and create false signatures. Remember your training, Ravik. Complete the mission, whatever the cost. Another blast rocked the building. Warning klaxons blared as the outer defenses began to fail. Ravik made his decision. Doctor, the moment that validation hits 100%, you transmit. Don't wait for confirmation, don't wait for us. Just send it. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. It's been an honor, Ravik. The honor was mine. He checked his weapons and moved to join his former mentor. Together, they could buy her the time she needed. The next 8 minutes were chaos. Ven had sent his elite forces, assassins and special operations troops who knew how to deal with rogue operatives. Ravik and Kivaris held them back through a combination of skill, experience, and sheer desperation. Every second they bought was another percentage point closer to completion. 98%, Dr. Wells called out. 2 more minutes. Ravik took a plasma burst to his shoulder but kept fighting. Kavaris had set up a brilliant series of defensive positions, forcing their attackers to come at them one at a time through narrow corridors. But they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "Director Venn," Kavaris announced suddenly, his voice carrying over the battle noise. "I can smell your fear from here. Come to do your own dirty work for once?" A cold voice responded from the shadows. "Kavaris. I should have made sure you were really dead 2 years ago. You can thank your own arrogance for that oversight." Kavaris was buying time, keeping Venn talking. "Did you really think you could hide the truth forever?" "The truth?" Venn's voice was closer now. "The truth is that our weapons made us strong. A few genetic abnormalities are a small price to pay for dominance. 99%. Dr. Wells's voice was triumphant. Venn's forces surged forward. Ravik took another hit, this one to his leg. Kavaris was bleeding from multiple wounds but still standing. And then they heard the sound they'd been waiting for. Transmission complete. Data packet sent to Counselor Naira. Venn's roar of rage was cut short by the sudden activation of every communication device in the building. Counselor Naira's voice, amplified and authoritative, filled the air. "Director Venn, by order of the High Council, you and all forces under your command are to stand down immediately. The evidence of your crimes against the KHREF people has been received and verified. Military units loyal to the Council are en route to take you into custody." The fighting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Venn's forces, hearing that their actions were now known to the High Council, began laying down their weapons. Even the most loyal among them weren't willing to fire on Council forces. "This isn't over," Venn snarled, but Ravik could hear the defeat in his voice. The director knew that once the evidence was public, there would be no coming back from it. "Actually," Kavaris said with satisfaction, "it is." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Council forces secured the building. Medical teams treated the wounded. Dr. Wells's treatment protocol was immediately sent to medical facilities across KHREF space, along with the evidence of the Eternal Dominion's crimes. "The genetic damage can be reversed," Dr. Wells explained to Counselor Naira in person, her exhaustion evident but her voice strong. "With immediate implementation of the treatment protocol, we can prevent any further deterioration and begin healing the affected populations." "You've done our people a great service," Naira said solemnly. "Both of you." She included Ravik in her gesture. "The Council would like to offer you a permanent position as head of research at our main medical facility. We'll need your expertise to oversee the treatment program." Dr. Wells smiled, one hand resting on her belly. "I accept, on one condition. I want Ravik assigned as my permanent security chief. After recent events, I don't think anyone would object to that arrangement." Naira's crystalline eyes sparkled with amusement. "Though it's unusual for an assassin to become a protector." "Not really," Ravik said quietly. "We protect what matters most. Some of us just needed a reminder of what that truly means." 3 months later, Ravik stood in the medical center's nursery, watching through the observation window as Dr. Wells cradled her newborn daughter. Little Thea had her mother's eyes and, if her early behaviors were any indication, her determination as well. "Was it worth it?" Kavaris asked, joining him at the window. His former mentor had been officially restored to life and given a position overseeing security reforms. "Look around," Ravik replied. The nursery was full of KHREF infants, all born healthy thanks to the treatment protocol. The genetic damage was being reversed. Birth rates were stabilizing. His people had a future again, thanks to a human scientist he had been sent to kill. "I was assigned to end a life," he said softly. "Instead, I helped save countless others." Through the window, Dr. Wells looked up and smiled, gently rocking Thea. The baby gripped her mother's finger with tiny but strong hands. "New beginnings," Kavaris said thoughtfully. Yes, Ravik agreed, watching the woman and child he had sworn to protect. For all of us.